else is considered a loser next to that person we won. But this is not innate to us. This is something that's a construct that the society has agreed to. And you can either buy into it or you don't have to buy into it. One of the things that often comes up is that people will say, but I spent so many years training to do this, and now I've been laid off. You know, and now technology has displaced me. I don't have a job anymore. I can't be in this industry. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Years ago, the Federal Communications Commission legislated a new law that said the cable television systems that were going in had to have 100 or more channels. And so the coaxial cable that they were putting down had to be a different standard. What they did in doing that was that they legislatively obsoleted about 300,000 miles of perfectly good 12-channel coaxial cable. And everybody was moaning and groaning and saying, you know, this is the ruin of us, blah, blah, blah. And I came up with the idea of saying, wait a minute, why don't we go to the developed countries that have electrification projects going, where they have the trucks and they have the big reels that are laying down cable for electrical power, and just have them add extra places for more spools and create two-way communications out into the rural areas. Start laying that down so that in rural areas they could have video classes, video conferencing, so that they could do this. And I talked a couple of countries into doing this. Costa Rica was one, Iran was another, but the people who got the contract for Iran didn't pay me my finder's fee. So when the revolution was coming, and they let me know the revolution was coming, I didn't tell the people who got the contract. So they lost whatever they had put in there. And that wasn't being mean, it's just, you know, as you sow, so shall you reap. You know, I had no obligation to tell them. Nobody got hurt, but they lost a bunch of money. But they didn't have to. Or maybe they would have lost it anyway, I don't know. But I'm telling you this story not just so you can see that what looks like a failure of one thing or the rejection of something is actually an opportunity for something else. So if somebody is rejecting some part of your training or your skills, it simply means you're in the wrong place. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with those skills. Okay? You could be absolutely the best person in another business, in another field, in another location. But where you are, there's no saying in metaphysics, you know, the person who's in the wrong place is busting to get out. So a lot of times people act inappropriately or they get fired, and because they should not be there. They should be someplace else. Okay. Now, inside of each of us is that inner divinity, that place within us where God is expressing. And the way we generally get insight or understanding about that is through intuitions. And an intuition is not a message, it's a knowing that comes to us. And that knowing is rooted in our innate divinity. So if we can stay connected to that inner knowing, we always have divine guidance. We always have a sense of direction in our lives. We are always in a place where we can turn within and say, lead me, guide me. Let me know what I need to know. Make me have a divine impulsion to go where I need to go to do what is going to do. And by doing that, what we're basically doing is what they call surrendering to the divine within us, allowing it to lead us and guide us, allowing it to make easy our way. This is what Jesus was talking about, you know. He said, if you follow that inner I am, the beingness of yourself, it will make easy and make straight the way before you. Now, intuition is something that we get to build. It's not at a particular level. As you do meditation, which is basically turning within and listening, and this element of intuition requires that we are willing to listen, because it usually comes as a message or as a feeling. And so by having that listening, making time in your life to turn within and just listen, just open yourself to receiving. What you start to get is a stronger sense of when you are getting a true intuition from the divine, as opposed to your ego saying, well, if you did this, you would look good. If you did that, you would look good. Ooh, you could make a lot of money doing this or doing that. Generally, intuition has to do with your creative expression and with being in service to life. Because when you get those intuitions, it's usually a gentle thing. It says it would be a good idea to do this. It would be helpful to do that. And if you listen to those intuitions and you follow them along, ways will open up that give you serendipitous good, unexpected good will come back to you. Now, some folks have been getting intuitions their whole lives and have been ignoring them. And what happens is that sometimes the intuitions get louder and louder. I got to the point where my ego was so outrageous that I wasn't really listening when I would turn within. So I started in my prayers to say, and reveal this to me in a way I can understand and expect and accept and act upon, regardless of anyone's opinions, even my own. Because that inner critic, you know, I used to laugh. I used to tell people, I'm like a quick drawer when it comes to finding what's wrong. You know, it's part of being a New Yorker. You know, you have to know what's wrong with this, what's wrong with that. And that's not helpful. In most situations, it's not helpful to find the 1 or 2 or 3% of things that are wrong. You're better off looking at the big picture of what's right. Anyway, so sometimes you have to tell yourself, you have to train yourself to listen to your intuition. Easy way to do that, and we teach it here, is parking places. You know, we teach that the first thing you do is you accept that there is an answer. Because if all that there is God, God has all the answers. So the answer already exists. The right parking place for you already exists. And if you will just accept that, you start by accepting that, and then you look around and you open yourself to guidance, to direction, to promptings. And if your prompting says go around the block, you drive around the block. And when you come back to the street you wanted to be on, somebody has pulled out and there's your parking place. People used to laugh and say, boy, you have a real in with the parking gods. No, it's being in tune with that inner prompting. Just that inner prompting. You know, somebody was interviewing Harrison Ford, and they were asking about his spiritual practices. And they said, well, you know, with all this Star Wars stuff, do you believe in the Force? And he looked at the interviewer, he said, I believe in being the Force. Which was a very big thing. Because really, when you come to understand that your life is God's life, you are the Force. The Force is already with you. But you have to learn how to use it. You have to learn how to be receptive to your own wisdom, to your own promptings, to your own intuitions, which will say, when you get in your car, it might say,